Jürgen Stroop was born in 1895 in a small town in Germany. Like many people of his generation, he grew up in a country filled with pride in its traditions, but also marked by change and uncertainty. His family was strict, conservative, and very patriotic. From a young age, Stroop was drawn to military life and authority. He believed strongly in duty and discipline, and he saw the army as a place where he could find purpose and respect. When the First World War broke out in 1914, Stroop joined the German army as a volunteer. He was only 19, full of enthusiasm, and convinced that the war would bring glory to Germany. He served as a soldier on the Western Front, where he experienced the harsh realities of trench warfare. Like many of his fellow soldiers, he saw death and destruction on a massive scale. The war ended in Germany's defeat in 1918, and Stroop, like many veterans, returned home to a country that felt broken. Germany was humiliated by the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. The economy was collapsing, and there was widespread anger and confusion about who was to blame. Stroop struggled to adjust to civilian life. He missed the sense of order and importance that the army had given him. He became involved with nationalist and right-wing groups that claimed Germany had been betrayed by weak politicians and by its enemies. These groups rejected democracy and called for a return to strong leadership. When Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party began to rise to power in the 1920s and early 1930s, Stroop found their ideas appealing. They promised to restore pride, discipline, and strength to Germany. Stroop joined the Nazi Party in the early 1930s, drawn by its vision of national unity and its emphasis on loyalty to the state. He also joined the SS, the organization led by Heinrich Himmler that served as both a political and paramilitary force. The SS attracted men like Stroop, people who valued hierarchy, obedience, and power. Within the SS, Stroop found a clear structure and a sense of belonging. He was ambitious and eager to rise through the ranks, and he proved himself to be disciplined and loyal. He adopted Nazi racial ideas completely, seeing Jews and other groups as enemies of the German people. His commitment to the Nazi cause was not just professional, but deeply personal. During the 1930s, Stroop held several administrative and police roles as the Nazi regime expanded its control over Germany. When the Second World War began in 1939, he continued to serve in the SS and took part in operations in occupied territories. By this time, the SS had become one of the most powerful institutions in Nazi Germany, responsible not only for security and policing, but also for carrying out the regime's racial policies, including the persecution and murder of Jews. Stroop was a man who followed orders without question. He believed that his actions served a higher purpose, the survival and purity of the German nation, as defined by Nazi ideology. In 1943, Stroop was sent to Warsaw, the capital of occupied Poland. There, a major event was unfolding that would define his life and his legacy. The Jews of Warsaw had been forced into a ghetto, a small, crowded section of the city where hundreds of thousands of people were imprisoned under terrible conditions. By 1943, most of them had already been deported to extermination camps, mainly Treblinka. Those who remained knew that the end was near, and many decided to resist rather than die passively. In April 1943, Jewish fighters in the Warsaw Ghetto launched an uprising against the Germans. When the uprising began, Stroop was assigned to crush it. He was appointed by SS and police leader Friedrich Kruger to take command of the operation. Stroop approached the task like a military mission. He gathered German forces, along with police units and collaborators, and surrounded the ghetto. His goal was simple: destroy the resistance and eliminate the remaining Jewish population. But the Jewish fighters were determined. They used homemade weapons, pistols, grenades, and Molotov cocktails. They knew they could not win, but they wanted to fight for their dignity and for the memory of their families. For Stroop, this resistance was an insult to German authority. He responded with overwhelming force. Day after day, his troops moved through the ghetto, burning buildings, destroying bunkers, and killing anyone they found. The fighting continued for weeks. Stroop ordered his men to set fire to entire blocks, forcing people out of hiding. Many of the fighters and civilians were burned alive or shot as they tried to escape. Others were captured and executed. Stroop personally oversaw many of these operations, walking through the ruins as smoke filled the sky. He later compiled a detailed report about the operation, known as the Stroop Report. It was filled with photographs and descriptions of the destruction of the ghetto. In it, Stroop proudly described how the uprising had been crushed, referring to it as a cleansing of the area. The report ended with the cold and chilling statement that the Jewish quarter of Warsaw no longer existed. To Stroop, this was a victory, proof of his efficiency and loyalty. He saw himself as a soldier who had carried out his orders perfectly. In reality, the Warsaw Ghetto uprising became one of the most powerful symbols of resistance during the Holocaust. While the fighters were ultimately defeated, their courage inspired others and showed that, even in the darkest conditions, people could fight back. For Stroop, however, it was only another assignment successfully completed. After Warsaw, he continued his career within the SS, serving in other occupied areas. As the war turned against Germany, Stroop remained loyal to the regime. He believed in the Nazi cause until the very end. When Germany finally surrendered in 1945, he was captured by American forces. Like many high-ranking SS officers, Stroop tried to deny responsibility for his actions. He claimed he had only followed orders and that he was a soldier, not a criminal, but the evidence against him was overwhelming, especially the report he had written about the destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto. He was first tried by an American military court and sentenced to death, but his execution was delayed so he could be handed over to Poland, where he faced trial for his crimes. The Polish court found him guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Throughout his trial, Stroop remained largely unrepentant. He saw himself as a man who had done his duty, who had served his country faithfully. He did not express genuine remorse for the thousands of people who had been murdered under his command. While in prison, Stroop spent time with another Nazi official, Kazimierz Moczarski, a Polish resistance fighter who had been arrested. Moczarski later wrote about his conversations with Stroop, describing how the former SS leader spoke with pride about his past, showing little understanding of the human suffering he had caused. Stroop's words revealed a man deeply shaped by ideology and obedience, unable or unwilling to see the moral consequences of his actions. In 1951, Jürgen Stroop was executed by hanging in Warsaw, near the site of the ghetto he had destroyed 8 years earlier. His death marked the end of a man who had been both a symbol and an instrument of Nazi brutality. But his story remains important, because it shows how ordinary individuals, through belief and obedience, can become capable of extraordinary cruelty. Stroop was not a man born to be a monster. He was a product of his time, shaped by the values of nationalism, militarism, and obedience that dominated early 20th century Germany. He was ambitious and disciplined, but also deeply conformist. He did not question the morality of the system he served. To him, the commands of the state were absolute. Once he accepted Nazi ideology, he surrendered his capacity for independent thought. In his mind, destroying the Warsaw Ghetto was not murder, but the fulfillment of his duty as a soldier of the Reich. What makes Stroop's story particularly disturbing is how ordinary he seemed. He was not insane or driven by personal hatred alone. He was methodical, calm, and precise. He saw his actions as professional achievements. This attitude reflects one of the central lessons of history, that evil can often appear in the form of bureaucratic efficiency and blind obedience. Stroop's report on the destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto is chilling not just for its content, but for its tone. It reads like an administrative document, describing the killing of thousands of people as if it were a routine task. In the years after the war, historians and psychologists studied figures like Stroop to understand how such atrocities could happen. Many concluded that people like him were not exceptions, but examples of how ideology, authority, and conformity can destroy moral judgment. Stroop's loyalty to the Nazi regime was absolute, but it came at the cost of his humanity. Thanks for watching. If you have a thought regarding Jürgen Stroop, drop it in a comment below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe.